Greetings, this is Ted A. Roberts with Seeking the Everlasting Gospel Ministry, and today we're getting on chapter 3 of my book, The Church and the Fivefold Ministry, Should We Put Our Trust in Man? And I know it's been a little while since I was reading on this book. We took a break to do a couple of other books on video, and especially the last one it was a long chapter on the last book that I read on Satan, the Devil, and Hell. But again, this is going to be chapter 3, and this is called Give Us a King. That's the name of this chapter. And I just want to re-warn the listener of what I've already explained in the introduction to this book, or the introductory video, that I don't want anybody mistaking what I'm trying to say here. I'm not against pastors. I'm not against churches. These are ordained by God. But we just need to understand them in its complicated form. So I'm going to be saying some stuff here today that may sound a little controversial when it comes to the church world, but just give me a chance to explain my position. So let's get started. We're going to go with 1 Samuel chapter 8, and this is going to set a pattern for the direction I'm going to be heading. And it says, "And it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel." Now here we're seeing that Samuel's sons were continuing their father's work. But before we get into the details of that very important story, let's see how God had ordained at first for there to be judges over Israel instead of kings. Because I'm sitting there getting distracted by moving this stuff over here. Because we know later on God ordained for there to be kings. But first, he ordained for there to be judges over Israel. Now, let's do this by talking about Moses, the man of God, who was made a judge over the children of Israel in the wilderness. And we see this in Exodus 18, verse 13, and then verses 15 through 16. "It came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people. And the people stood by Moses from the morning until the evening." Now let's jump down to verse 15. "Moses said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come unto me to inquire of God, when they have a matter, they come to me. And I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And this, as again in opposition to there being a king in Israel at that time, is what God really wanted, for is what he had first ordained. That is, even after Moses had left the scene, God continued to only appoint judges. We see that in Judges 2:16, which I believe I got a quote here, and I made a whole explanatory note, I think, for a quote. Well, I'll say a little bit more about it too. Judges 2:16, "Nevertheless the Lord raised up judges which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them." It only takes a little reasoning to see that the office of a judge, as compared to a king, are two total different things to God, as we will certainly see within this present chapter. Not only so, as we will also see, one office indicates leadership, whilst the other defines headship. We'll also watch how God gave one to the people in his pure will, whilst the other was given in his anger, the latter being because the hearts of the people were not right. As we're going to see, that latter calling is the kingship of what he didn't really want. But even as early as Moses, the people started looking toward mere man as their mediator between them and God. But the people were scared to face God themselves because of the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, as we see in Exodus 20:18 through 19, which basically says, "And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die." They even at one point made Moses cover his face with a veil, because they could not behold God's glory. Exodus 34, verses 29 through 30. And all of this shows us the beginning of people wanting a fleshly man to be their go-between for them and God. A fleshly king. Now let's continue in Samuel. Now, the name of his firstborn, Samuel's firstborn, was Joel, and the name of his second, Abiah, and they were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in their dad's ways, but they turned aside after lucre, money. They took bribes, and they perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and they came to Samuel in Ramah. And they said to him, Behold, you're old. Well, that's not a nice thing to say to begin with. Your sons do not walk in your ways. Now, make us a king to judge us like all the nations, all the ungodly nations. And as I'm going to point out in a moment, so that we can be like all the other churches out in the land. But we'll save that for just a moment. Make us a king to judge us like all the nations. Explanatory note. Obviously, this was the wrong solution to an already bad problem. In fact, their suggestion, or rather their demand, would only make the problem much, much worse for them. Certainly, it would have been best to ask for better judges than Samuel's sons, or to ask God to convict the brothers into better obedience to his will and for the peace and safety of the people. But, what happened instead? But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people, and all that they say unto you. For they have not rejected you, they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, to be their king. As I pointed out in an explanatory note just a moment ago, there is a huge difference in having a judge to watch over us and having an actual king to be our headship. Again, a difference between a leader and a head. As was said, for many years, God had judges over the people, the thing which pleased God the most. But God knew that those days, they were over. And it was time to give the people what they really wanted. A head over them, instead of he himself being their head and their king. Somebody of flesh and blood that they could see, to hear his words of encouragement, to do as he bade, so as to appear as if they were doing the very will of God by doing what a man had said out of his own mouth for them to obey. But the price was to come high, for God surely was angered at this. Let's continue in Samuel. This is God continued to talk. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me, and they served other gods, so do they also unto you. Now therefore, hearken unto their voice. Howbeit, yet protest solemnly unto them. Show them the manner of the kind of a king that shall reign over them. And so Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, Well, this is going to be the manner of a king that shall reign over you. He's going to take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen. And some shall run before his chariots, appointed ministers under his ministry. He's going to appoint him captains over thousands. He's going to ordain elders. And captains over 50s, laborers and ministers in the church. And he's going to set them to ear his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots, speeches and sermons and projects that do keep the people in the church. And he's going to take your daughters to be confectionaries and to be cooks and to be bakers, laborers in the church. He's going to take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. You labor, both physically and financially, and yet somebody else is going to get the benefit. And he's going to take 1/10 of your seed and of your vineyards and give to his officers and to his servants. Now, this almost goes without saying. A tenth? Is that not your tithing? And not only financially, but of your own labor with your own hands. And these go to the pastor and to his ministers who sit under him. Do you not pay salaries in some cases to some pastors or ministers? He's going to take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He's going to take the tenth of your sheep, and you shall be his servants. Now, before either tossing the book down if you're reading it, or shutting off this video if you're listening to it, or before anybody takes an offense into what I've been saying here, that is in my own modern interpretations of what those last quoted verses were conveying toward us today in types and shadows, please allow me to elaborate my true intentional thoughts with all of this. For by being just tossing these things upon the table without much explanations, it could really seem that I am insulting people for attending church services, or that I'm tearing up any church that's in this world. As I've already been contending, such is not the case, even if it may appear so at the first reading of my own inserted words into those verses. No, what's to actually be destroyed is not the modern church or the modern church system, unless God himself does it, but it's to be instead anything that stops God from being our king. On an individual personal basis, that is, which is one of the ultimate goals for our lives. Whether what's stopping us be an actual dictating king, dictating minister, or even our own stinking fleshly minds, which can also become, that mind of ours, that carnal mind of ours, a dictating king over our lives. And how to do so is to actually be reared under a ministry that allows such to happen. That is, which allows us to grow up to be an adult. But if they don't allow us to grow up to be an adult, as to finding ourselves under an evil regime, then when our training is finished within that bad church, there are some bad churches out there, okay? Let's just be honest about it. God will move us out away from them when he's ready for us to move, but not before. Yeah, it gets a little complicated here, and that's where I'm going to get in and explain all this. For if we are really a true child of God, then why keep us locked away inside of it forever, or until we physically die? Unless, and there is that possibility, we have become a minister that's helping others within that same church system, who truly needs our help for their own advancement. This is all one big, elaborate world of wonderment. Who can truly know the ends and depths of such an institute? Therefore, we aren't to destroy what God himself has set up. Again, he set up the modern church and all that's in it, but to try and to understand his purpose for such things to begin with, and of how we play a role in it. The exercise for our understanding about 1 Samuel's words is not in being terrified that God created such a system out of his wrathful anger, but to understand why he did such a thing to begin with. And the simple answer is that it was because of the infirmity of people's flesh, their wicked, evil minds, as it says in Jeremiah 17:9. But then one may ask that if he knew that men could not function without a fleshly man being their king during their child and teenage years, that is, in God's years for us, not in our own natural years, of how long you've been in his services, why did he first set up judges instead of a king at the beginning of Israel's conception as a nation? Easy enough. He needed to show those people, as well as us today, because he already knew that mankind cannot function during their youthful godly years without a fleshly man being their head. You see what I'm saying here? It was God's intention that there needed to be such a church system. Even all the way back in the Old Testament, it was all ordained, every bit of it. Folks, this is the reason for the modern church today. It's because of the infirmity of people's flesh. And that before we can actually function as a grown adult, again, in godly years, not earthen years, we have to have a fleshly man over us. Again, don't shut me off just yet. Listen until I'm finished with all this. That cannot be escaped from, even if we dispute the fact with all of our might.